Possey. The Possey, the instant crew who controls Miami and conquered Jamaica.
We'll never get a better shot.
Shower Posse, one of the wildest and most feared organizations in Caribbean history. A group of guys who came from adverse poverty and built millions of dollars in a short time, but along the way caused massive destruction that ultimately led to their historic downfall. In this video, you'll hear some of the craziest stories you've ever heard. This is the story of Jamaica's Shower Posse. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. You can also follow the Instagram page as well. So let's get into it. The story begins in Jamaica, a small island located 1,000 miles south of the United States. It was a British colony for over 300 years until it finally gained its independence in 1962. Since then, the country has been divided into two rival political parties. First, you have the People's National Party, also known as PNP. This is the Liberal Socialist Party of Jamaica. Typically, the Rastafari culture has championed this party as they represent equity for everyone. On the other hand, you have the Jamaican Labour Party, also known as JLP. This is the conservative party who champions free markets and lack of social services. They pretty much oppose the PNP in every way possible, even beyond political ideology. Just like anywhere, the political parties are on opposite spectrums and don't get along. Except in Jamaica, it's way deeper than you can imagine. Neighborhoods are either affiliated with PNP or JLP. So if one neighborhood is JLP and across the street is PNP, they have to be bitter rivals. This is mainly true in the capital city of Kingston, where things are out of control. Since the 1960s, Kingston has been one of the poorest and most dangerous cities in the world. And most of this is due to the major political rivalry. Originally, children could grow up and choose their own political affiliation. But after years of opposition, it became about which neighborhood you're from. So if you were from a JLP neighborhood, you had to ride with them. Obviously, this created a toxic environment, and we start off in the worst place of them all. Welcome to West Kingston, easily the most dangerous place in all of Jamaica. The area is divided into two neighboring sections. First, you have the Tivoli Gardens, an area built by JLP. The area was once a Rastafari homeless camp and was controversially torn down by the JLP. And for this reason, the People's National Party was infuriated and despised anyone who moved in. Specifically, the community across the street were not fans, to say the least. This would be Denham Town, a strong community of PNP loyalists. One of these people was a man named Lester Lloyd Coke. Growing up, Lester was raised as a PNP ride or die and was taught to hate the opposite JLP.
When the power goes out, your Chevy Silverado EV can do more than just drive.
Good thing we have our Silverado.
But despite the rough nature of the area, Lester was not initially interested in this life. Instead, he found a job as a locksmith and hoped to make that his career. However, in 1966, tragedy would come his way. At the age of 19, Lester was hit 6 times in the chest and left to die in his own neighborhood. His friends scattered and he figured that it was all over for him. But then out of nowhere, a group of men rushed to his aid. They bravely picked him up and rushed him across the street to the Tivoli Gardens. And there, the JLP doctors ended up saving his life. Lester felt blessed and was extremely thankful for the Tivoli men who saved him. And on the other hand, he was extremely disappointed in the friends he grew up with. So now Lester had the dilemma of a lifetime. He was raised to hate the people who just saved his life. So what do I do? Long story short, Lester Coke moved to the Tivoli Gardens and switched his alliance to JLP. Instantly, all of his friends and family broke ties with him, and now he had to watch his back at all times. So to protect himself, he began running with the Tivoli Gardens' biggest crew. This would be the Phoenix Gang, and they did all of the dirty work for the JLP in West Kingston. Quickly, Lester gained the reputation of being the coldest stepper in West Kingston. No one wanted to run into him, and he was willing to do anything for the JLP. Well, the year is 1976, and things are about to get crazy. Over the previous few years, Jamaica had seen violence like never before, and given that the general election is around the corner, everyone was worried about what could happen. In particular, Jamaica's biggest superstar wanted to make a change. Bob Marley wanted nothing more than peace between the two sides, and although he was championed by the PNP, Bob never pushed a political agenda. All he truly cared about was peace within his community, people over politics. But unfortunately, Bob Marley was thrown in the mix. The PNP candidate Michael Manley decided to use Bob Marley for his campaign. This was bad news because it put his life at risk. The JLP was now after him. 10 days before the election, Bob Marley decided to host a major festival in Kingston. It was a free concert to bring unity before the election. Well, unfortunately, the PNP began advertising the concert as their own. December 3rd, 1976. It's 2 days before the concert and Bob Marley is at his beautiful house on Hill Road. Inside, he and his band are rehearsing for the major show. At 8:30 p.m., Bob's wife arrives in the driveway to bring everyone food. So Bob walks outside to help her out. And as he gets to her car, he notices a man ruffling in the bushes. So he takes a closer look and guess who it is? Lester Lloyd Coke. So instantly, Bob turns around to run. Thankfully, Bob and his wife made it after surgery. But still, this enraged everyone in Jamaica. Obviously, he was a national hero, but now he was also gonna miss the concert. Or maybe not. Everyone around Bob told him to skip the concert and to leave Jamaica for his safety. Obviously, Bob knew the risks, but he valued his country's unity over his own safety. December 5th, 1976. Despite Bob being doubtful to come, over 50,000 people showed up hoping to see him. They waited all day until Bob was escorted by hundreds of security into
Shout outs, man. There's a lot of shout outs today. Shout out to y'all being active and being on the page and showing love to the stream and the content. Summer, Chris, Eli, Deb, Key, Esther. Let's go, man. I appreciate y'all, man. Keep watching. Keep showing love in the inbox. Wherever you showing love at, I appreciate it. Comments, whatever.
the venue. And at sunset, Bob Marley emerged on the stage and gave the concert of a lifetime. This is one of the greatest moments in Jamaican history, and it all backfired for JLP. People began seeing their true colors and began switching over to PNP. So 10 days later, Michael Manley won the election in a landslide, defeating Edward Sega. And now that PNP was in power, the Jamaica Labour Party and the Phoenix Gang had lost their control. So now the PNP could get revenge for what happened to Bob Marley. In August of 1977, Phoenix Gang leader Charles Massett passed away after getting pulled over by a squad of police officers. The officers claimed that he was the aggressor and they acted in self-defense. However, everyone knew the truth that it was PNP flexing their power. Lester Coke was infuriated, and now it was his time to step up as a leader. He had waited over a decade for this position, so you know that he was more than ready. By this time, the Tivoli Gardens were depleted, and now it was his mission to get them back into power. Lester Coke came out with a vengeance, and his first move was changing the name to the Shower Posse. Some say that it represents a shower of blessings, and others say it represents a shower of something else. Well, from the gate, Lester Coke began recruiting thousands of members. On top of this, he had the largest arsenal of choppers that Jamaica had ever seen. A former CIA whistleblower claims that the CIA was funding Lester Coke. However, this was never proven in court. But what we do know is that the Shower Posse began invading PNP neighborhoods all over Kingston. They became the most feared in Kingston as they were breaking all of the unwritten rules. Previously, you needed to target someone of essence, not just a random civilian. But Lester Coke was cold-blooded and he wanted destruction by any means. And this leads us to the 1980 election, possibly the worst time in Jamaican history. The Shower Posse made demonstrations in the worst way possible. During the 2 months before the election, 898 PNP supporters lost their lives. This resulted in major pressure for Jamaicans to vote for JLP, as they feared of what could happen if they didn't. On October 30th, 1980, the election results were announced. It was the most lopsided election in Jamaican history, with the JLP winning 51 of 60 seats. Edward Sega was now the Prime Minister of Jamaica. He promised to turn them into the Singapore of the Caribbean and for them to have a booming economy. To boost the economy, the JLP printed a ton of money and lowered interest rates. In the short run, this made Jamaica prosperous and everyone was happy. But as we know, bubbles are always gonna pop. So the early 1980s became a time of hyperinflation and mass unemployment. The Jamaican dollar lost so much value that other countries would not even trade it. But while most Jamaicans were struggling, others were striking it rich. And by others, I really mean Lester Coke, so let me explain. Edward Sega ran on the premise of being hard on crime and taking all of the dealers off the street. So this is exactly what he did. He got everyone locked up except for Lester Coke. This of course allowed Lester and the Shower Posse to take over all of the markets of Kingston, Jamaica. But not only this, Lester was allowed to import anything from Colombia. While according to residents at the time, Lester Coke was generating so much money that he could never spend it in a lifetime. So with all this wealth, he decided to share it with those who he loved most. In just a short time, he turned the Tivoli Gardens into a high-class society. He paid for everyone's education, he gave them jobs, and he provided the best healthcare that money could buy. In a major recession where most are starving, the Tivoli Gardens were thriving like never before. This of course made the PNP sections upset, but this wasn't even the biggest problem. The other JLP sections were not getting help from Lester Coke, and one section in particular decided to take a stand. In 1984, the neighborhood of Rima decided to complain to Lester Coke. They showed him how poor their apartments were and how Tivoli can't be the only ones getting taken care of. Lester Coke took this personally because he never liked anyone questioning his decisions, but he decided to give them the benefit of the doubt and granted them an official meeting.
This is gonna be my last reaction video for today, guys. But I will be back first thing in the morning. That's why I wanted to get off now, so that I can wake up earlier to give y'all more content in the morning. Because I know I ain't showed y'all no love like that the last couple of days, but it's only because I was in the studio working on getting that album done, working on getting the mixtape done. We're working on 2 albums. I'm working on 2 albums and the mixtape while working on content and a podcast. Alright, while having some other side hustles that I'm working on. I don't know if y'all gonna see me on Friday or if I'm gonna be streaming this Friday. I might have some things I need to be taken care of. But if you see me Friday, that means that it didn't happen. But we'll see. No big deal if it don't, but we'll see how it goes. If I'm here, I'm here. If I'm not, I'm not.
Mace. Second, 1984. Lester Coke and his Shower Posse bodyguards enter Rima for the meeting. That's when one of the Rima men begins complaining about how Lester won't do anything for them. He then tells him that if things don't change, they'll switch over to PNP. Lester makes the worst decision possible. Lester single-handedly wiped out all of the men at the table. The Rima neighborhood was devastated and they decided to switch sides to PNP. He knew that he messed up and he figured that it could all catch up to him. Crossing his own side could potentially piss off Edward Sega. So 2 days later on May 4th, Lester fled Jamaica with 20 of his Shower Posse men. Welcome to Miami, Florida. When they arrived, they could not believe their eyes. The tall buildings, fancy cars, and beautiful women. There's no way this is real life. At first, Lester Coke and his men enjoyed the experience to the fullest extent. They had money saved up and they could finally live a relaxing life. Lester even bought a house in Miami Gardens, which at the time was a brand new
Like I said before in the last video, this was the story. This was the real side of the story. This was how the story actually So the movie that they were portraying, these who they were supposed to actually be, they just changed the names and everything. But this is the Shadas. These were the actual Shadas, bro. But they're not gonna tell you that. But
suburbs. So during the night, they'd drive to South Beach to party, and then they'd come back to sleep during the day. But
doesn't that sound very familiar? Doesn't that story? Who else was from Jamaica that went to Florida and was robbing niggas and all of that, extorting niggas and shit? Shot us.
quickly they realized that Jamaican money only goes so far in Miami. So with his Colombian connections, Lester got back into the game. The Shower Posse began building their clientele throughout the streets of Miami. They weren't there to cause any problems, but at a certain point it was kind of inevitable. Despite their power in Jamaica, they were nobodies in Miami, and that meant that people were gonna try them. January 22nd, 1985. The Shower Posse are set to complete a transaction with their crew in Little Haiti. So Lester and his right-hand man Charles Little Nut Miller arrive at the location. It happens to be an abandoned house, which should have been a red flag. Regardless, they enter the house to meet the Zoes. But the Zoes aren't there to purchase anything. Instead, they surround the Shower Posse and run off with their stuff. They had no idea who they had just messed with. This was bad news, and Lester wanted to prove a point. The next day, January 23rd, 1985, Lester and Charles go to Little Haiti by themselves, looking for the men. They drive to the house from the day before, and they boldly walk inside. Right there are the 5 men from the day before. Bam! The 5 men did not make it, and word began buzzing around Miami. The Shower Posse were here to take over. They decided to set up in Miami Gardens as it was a close suburb to the city. And from Lester's house, all of the money and deals were made. Things went smoothly for a couple of weeks, but then the worst possible news would come for Lester. While walking through the neighborhood, Charles Miller notices something very strange. Another group of Jamaicans had moved in just down the street. So Charles rushes home and informs Lester of what he had seen. Of course, Lester was curious, so he walks over to the house with Charles. As he walks up, his jaw drops to the floor. Standing in front of the house is a man named Kenneth Black, also known as Skang Don. Skang Don was possibly the most notorious PNP leader in Kingston, the head of what's known as the Spangler Posse. Back in Kingston, the Spangler Posse and Shower Posse had years of battles, so this was bad news. Lester escaped Jamaica just for his rivals to move in 2 blocks away. Well, of course, he wanted to prove that Miami belonged to him. March 30th, 1985. Lester gets word of a reggae party in nearby Fort Lauderdale, and he hears that Skang Don might be there. Although they're neighbors, Lester knows that catching Skang in their own neighborhood would be a terrible idea. So to him, this is the perfect opportunity. At 1 a.m., the Shower Posse arrive at the reggae party. They walk into the party with their blowers tucked in their pants. Then they hide in the bathroom and send a member to go looking for Skang Don. The member can't find him anywhere and walks back to the bathroom. Lester gets frustrated and allegedly walks out to the floor to look for himself. As he walks out, he notices Skang Don at the DJ booth with Spangler members. So then the Shower Posse make a wild decision. Bam! Thankfully, no Spangler members were injured, but sadly the DJ didn't make it. The incident was the very first Jamaican beef in Florida, and it kicked off a wild decade. The Shower Posse versus Spangler Posse was pretty much JLP versus PNP on American territory. And that takes us to September 1st, 1985. It's a beautiful Sunday morning in Coral Springs, Florida, a suburb an hour north of Miami. And here a major soccer match is taking place at a local park. The match is a collection of former professional players who are playing for a club championship. In the match happens to be a player named Colin Fowles, a former MLS star. Colin was born and raised in Kingston and actually grew up with some of the Spangler members. So naturally, the Spangler Posse shows up to the match to support their friend. The match is a great time and everyone is off their usual guard. On top of this, they're over an hour away from Miami, so they can't expect anything to happen. Well, little do they know the Shower Posse had followed them all the way from Miami Gardens. During the game, the Shower Posse made a devastating decision. Colin was a beloved member of the US and Jamaican soccer communities, and everyone was shocked. The police couldn't figure anything out, as many of the Shower Posse members were not citizens and could not be identified. But then Miami police got a random call. In December of 1985, a random man with a Jamaican accent called in. He told police that he's very close with Lester Koch and that he's fed up with all of the bad things he's doing to the community. The man's identity was kept secret, but everyone knew that it was from inside the Shower Posse circle. The man gave police Lester's address and told them what they'll find inside of his house. This alone was enough for a search warrant, and Miami police were certain that they could take down Lester Koch. On December 11th, 1985, Lester Koch's home in Miami Gardens was raided. Police found everything that the caller said they would, but unfortunately for them, everyone in the house except for Lester claimed that it was all theirs, and for that reason there were no longer grounds to arrest Lester Koch. At this point, Lester figured that he could get away with anything, but still he decided to lay low and stack his money. This continued for a couple of years, but then came some unexpected news. October 1st, 1987. Jamaican authorities announced that Lester Koch is wanted for the 1984 incident in Rima where 12 people lost their lives. So the United States extradited Lester Koch to Jamaica right away. But Lester knew that it was all smoke and mirrors, especially because Edward Sega was still in charge. Well, just like he expected, the Jamaican government didn't even put him in jail, despite what they told the media. The JLP government told him to lay low and to avoid leaving the Tivoli Gardens. All of this was to prevent the political opponents to finding out he was free. Well, you can't really tell Lester what to do, and he decided to put Sega's reputation on the line. November 3rd, 1987. It's a Tuesday morning in West Kingston, and Lester hops in his car to go grab some food. As he arrives at the store, he tries to double park. Well, behind him is a school bus who honks at him to move. This makes Lester upset, so he gets out of his car and walks up to the bus window, and that's when he makes a horrible decision. Witnesses from the scene told police that it was Lester Koch, but they knew that he wasn't supposed to be out. So police hid the statements and let Lester go back into hiding. Well, all of the bus drivers were infuriated with this act. So together, they all went on a strike. Every single bus driver in the Kingston area refused to do their job until Lester was arrested. Now, the JLP government had a major dilemma at their hands. On one hand, the kids are not able to go to school and there's no end in sight. On the other hand, charging Lester would prove that they never arrested him in the first place. After a while, the JLP had to make the right decision, and Lester Koch was arrested. This time, Lester actually had to sit behind bars. After nearly a year in jail, more bad news would come his way. October 1st, 1988. 87 Shower Posse members were indicted in America. New Jersey police arrested 53 while Miami police arrested 34. During the case, quite a few members gave up Lester Koch, including Charles Miller. And this is how they figured out everything Lester had done in Miami. This included the incident in Lil Haiti, the reggae party, and finally the Colin Fowles incident. So the FBI called on the Jamaican government to extradite Lester Koch. Prime Minister Edward Sega would refuse the request by telling the US that Jamaica would handle it themselves. The FBI knew that there was a higher chance of finding a beautiful woman in Bakersfield than the Jamaican government actually sentencing Lester Koch. And for those who aren't familiar, the chances are 0 in each case. This lasted for a few years and Lester never even faced trial in Jamaica. The US was not happy with this, so now they threatened sanctions on the country of Jamaica. Edward Sega and the JLP now had another dilemma on their hands. Either lose respect for most of Jamaica or turn in the man who funded your political career. It was really a lose-lose. Either way, Edward Sega was screwed. He decided to do nothing, and ultimately this lost him the 1990 election to Michael Manley. Now this was terrible news for Lester Koch, as now the PNP was in control of his fate. He went from balling in Miami to looking at life behind bars. On February 1st, 1992, Michael Manley announced that Lester Koch would be sent to the United States. The US Marshals were set to pick him up in 2 days from the Jamaican jail. Lester knew that it was all over for him, so he appointed his son to be the new leader of the Shower Posse. This would be Alexander Koch, also known as Jaw T. The announcement was made to all of the Shower Posse members on the morning of February 2nd. However, by 4 p.m., Jati was found in front of the Tivoli Gardens. No suspect was ever named, and Lester Koch was absolutely devastated by the news. And what would happen next is one of the strangest things I've ever covered. Later that night at 11 p.m., a major fire breaks out at the jail and firefighters rush in to help. There, they sadly discover Lester Koch. Everyone was confused on the matter, and 3 stories began being circulated. JLP supporters believe that he was silenced because of the dirt he had on the CIA. PNP supporters believe that he was trying to escape and he botched the process. And lastly, Kingston police believe that he was overwhelmed by what happened to his son. The world will never know this answer, but this was a wild 2 days in Jamaica. A week later, over 40,000 people showed up to his funeral to pay respects. For JLP supporters, his name is still highly regarded despite all of the awful things he did. They credit him with paying for their schooling and making sure their kids were always fed. Well, this was the end of the Shower Posse. New Jersey had taken them down, Miami had taken them down, and the only place they existed was now Toronto, Canada, and Philadelphia. But for Jamaica itself, the Shower Posse was done for. The PNP government was in total power, and the JLP was now weak. This honestly brought a couple of peaceful years to Kingston, so maybe the JLP and the Shower Posse were the problem to begin with. But just when Jamaica thought the Shower Posse era was done, one man was set to bring it back. Let me introduce you to a man named Christopher Koch, also known as Duddis. Duddis was Lester's youngest son, but he wasn't quite like the rest. He was raised away from the madness and sent to Ardeen Academy, the most prestigious school in Kingston. There, he went to school with the children of politicians and millionaires. Duddis was well regarded by the teachers at the school.
I use Shipped same-day delivery to stay connected with my sister during the holidays. She lives across the country. Shipped has tons of stores to order from. Groceries from Albertsons, crafts from Michael's, even pet supplies from PetSmart. The list goes on. So when we have long-distance movie nights, I turn to Shipped to get face masks, snacks, and everything else we need delivered to her and to me same day. Download the app or visit shipped.com.
Who claimed he was soft-spoken and an intellectual genius. In fact, no one at the school knew that he was the son of Lester Koch, as they used his mother's last name. Well, Christopher was an engineer by trade, a man who had dreams of owning his own construction company. But he also had another dream, a dream to finish his father's legacy. He deeply wanted to bring the Shower Posse back and to get the JLP back into power. So in 1994, Duddis went to the Tivoli Gardens to present his idea. Everyone was on board and already revered Duddis because of who his father was. And just like that, the Shower Posse was now officially back. But this time around, under Duddis, they were run completely differently. He wanted them to remain low-key, that way they could make money for decades without police attention. Well, through his father's and his school connections, Christopher Koch became extremely wealthy. And just like his father, a good portion of his money went to the Tivoli community. He turned the Tivoli Gardens to the wealthiest community in Kingston, just like the 70s and 80s. Well, over the next 10 years, the Shower Posse were stacking their money and remaining low-key. But then he was called on by the JLP. The People's National Party had been in power since 1990, and the 2007 election was coming up. After years of PNP policies, much of Jamaica's private sector was destroyed. So as one of the wealthiest residents of Jamaica, people were looking at Duddis to save the day. So in 2006, Duddis began campaigning for the JLP's newest candidate. This would be a man named Bruce Golding, and Duddis allegedly funded his career very well. Well, his efforts worked as the JLP won their first election in 17 years. This was a new era in Jamaica, and for Duddis, he would be paid back in a very nice way. His construction company received a $32 million deal to rebuild the Tivoli Gardens. This, of course, was paid by tax dollars, ultimately making Duddis even richer. So with $32 million, Duddis could now sit back and enjoy his life. But just when he thought that he was set for life, bad news would come his way. While wiretapping his connections in New York, the FBI overheard calls with Duddis on the phone. They allegedly overheard all kinds of illicit business. So in August of 2009, the FBI officially asked the Jamaican government to turn him over to face trial in New York. Well, Bruce Golding was extra loyal to the man who allegedly funded his career. career. So of course he refused to turn him in, claiming that the wiretaps were illegally obtained. So now Bruce Golding had the same dilemma as Edward Sega. Do I turn in my loyal man, or do I go against the US government? For 9 months, Bruce Golding refused to turn him in. But then he finally cracked. On May 17th, 2010, Golding announced that he would be turning in Christopher Koch. Ooh, the country erupted. Christopher Koch had thousands and thousands of loyal supporters, and none of them were happy. For years, he provided school, food, and jobs for entire neighborhoods. So for this reason, everyone decided to stand behind him. On May 18, 2010, the Shower Posse told Bruce Golding that they would not be turning over Christopher Koch. So over 10,000 Shower Posse members surrounded the Tivoli Gardens ready to sacrifice it all. They severely outnumbered the local authorities, so Bruce Golding backed off for a week. But then he enacted a national emergency and sent in the military. Between May 24th and May 27th, over 74 Shower Posse members lost their lives in front of the Tivoli Gardens. Still though, the Shower Posse had more men to spare, but Dudas knew that this was not a good idea. So on the night of May 27th, Dudas came up with a plan. He decided to put on a dress and large sunglasses and to try to sneak out at night. He only made it a few blocks until he passed the US Embassy where somebody recognized him. The next day, he was extradited to New York to face trial. On June 8th, 2012, he was officially sentenced to 23 years in prison. He's set to be released on January 25th, 2030. Well, after turning him in, Bruce Golding lost all of his likability. So on September 5th, 2011, he officially announced his resignation. However, to this day, he still denies ever communicating with Christopher Koch. And despite this blemish on his career, many consider him one of the greatest leaders in Jamaican history. But what do you guys think? If you're from Jamaica, let me know in the comments. But wait, let's get back on track to Christopher Dudas. Still to this day, Dudas is regarded as a savior in the Tivoli Gardens.
No, we don't need the police, we need Dudas, because that's where the justice lies. He's the only one who cares about the people and the citizens of Tivoli Garden. Nobody really cares. Right now, he's just disappointed. He's disappointed in the jurisdictional system. Well, the people of Tivoli Garden know that Dudas love them, and he'll always love them, and he's always in their hearts, because every time he writes, he just always give out his love to them, so they know that he will be always thinking about them. So will them. As long as nobody dies before that time, everybody here will still saying Dudas. Christopher Koch to the end. No matter what, we'll always be loyal to him.
We can sleep peaceful at night and everything. He provide everything good for the people in Tivoli Garden.
Because he's a good man. He's good for the people. Take care of the children, help them to go to school, take care of the old people.
Okay, so I want to do something a little bit different before the stream ends. That's what I was writing down. I don't want y'all to think that I wasn't paying attention. But this is for my Facebook Reels, because Facebook is where a lot of the views are starting to go up. And I would like to say to my most viewed reel from the podcast is the Smoke and Ball Show. By the way, if you guys are wondering what is the most viewed video, which we have just really started this month, and our most viewed video is already at 153 views, with one of our very first episodes, which was me, Key, and Bags. And then the second highest episode is a tie between the episode of me, Keon, Dev, and the episode with me, Keon, Dev, and Bags at 143. My bad. There's another episode, sorry, that's higher than that, between me, Bags, Keon, at 150. Alright, so the highest anything on my reviews since I've been streaming is my podcast show, Sports. So shout out to, again, the Smoke and Ball Show. I appreciate everybody that turns in. We do have an episode coming today. Bishop reaction highest view video is 80. My highest music sneak peek video review is at 82. And these are all reels. These are all just the reels, by the way. This is not what's like on the wall. These are just the reels. 82, and I think this is pretty high for. And then my highest music reaction video, I only done like 2, and it's both of my cousins. But the Sleepy Bad Ways VIP song was 83 at the highest. So I would like to get those streams up. I would like to have that in a few hours instead of a couple of days, but I'm still grateful. I think that's pretty high. I think that's good, knowing that I had so many technical difficulties at first. To see that the views went up, that to have that much views, especially on a podcast, is amazing. So thank you guys very much. Let's keep the views going up, not down. Just if y'all, whatever I need to do to keep y'all interested, what y'all want to see, you guys let me know. Send me things in the inbox to help me better your interest.
Do good for the community.
So shout out to everybody that I mentioned. Shout out to the Smoking Ball Show. Shout out to all the people reacting to the videos in the inbox, reading them. Thank you for all the people behind the scenes. All my family, my friends. Shout out to Texas. Shout out to Cali. Shout out to everywhere, man. New York. Shout out to everywhere, man. East Coast, West Coast, North. I got connections in high places, man. So I'll be back first thing in tomorrow. I'll probably have we might be straight into Smoking Ball, or I might be able to sneak in a reaction or two. I don't know, but the show we will start streaming since you guys are so in love with our damn show. At 11 a.m. my time. So probably about around kickoff, you guys can get these picks. Okay? You guys have a good night. See you guys tomorrow for Thanksgiving. And it's been a breeze. If you want to donate, it's either in the description or in the title up top up here or below down there. Sorry, ladies, I don't mean like that, but you get what I mean. Description or title. Facebook, title, YouTube, description.